Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the recent PTR build, which brings with it a couple heavy-handed Shadow Priest nerfs. So, bad news up front. This is going to be about an 8 to 10% single target nerf to Necrolord Shadow Priest, which I mean that's pretty big. That hurts, right? We definitely weren't 8 to 10% stronger than every other ranged spec. So um, even if we were, I mean, if we were, then we would have been nerfed to like middle of the pack now. But we weren't, so now we're even below that. But there's still a ton of stuff up in the air, so let's talk about it a little bit. So for anyone who wasn't around yesterday or hasn't read this article or anything, um, what are the nerfs? Well, first nerf for all priests, Pallid commands rattling mage's unholy bolt, so that your mage damage has been reduced by 40%, and then for the healing priests, they also got nerfed. 40% from your Pallid command damage is gone. That's a big nerf. To see a number like 40% on your spec when it's a nerf feels really bad. This is like gutting Pallid command basically. So that's the first nerf. There's more. And then the second nerf is down here. Your Shadow's Torment Mind. So this is from the 4-piece. Your Shadow's Torment Mind damage has also been reduced by 40%. So if you've been on the PTR at all, or you've been watching, content of Shadow Priests who have been on the PTR, maybe you've been keeping up with me, stuff like that, you might know that on the PTR, Shadow Priest was quite strong, for sure. I would say probably in the top 2, maybe top 3 ranged specs. In single target, we were quite strong, for sure. So we definitely needed a nerf. However, we weren't this much stronger than everybody else, right? This nerf, like I said at the intro of the video, I feel this nerf is heavy-handed. And what I mean by that is some Blizzard devs saw that Shadow was doing really well and gutted us, right? It's not like they just kind of, give us a little nerf so that would be a little worse. We're quite worse because of this. So it turns out to be, like I said, about an 8 to 10% single target damage nerf. As always, I'll leave a link to this article in the description below, and I'll also leave a link to the most up-to-date Shadow Priest sims from the Warcraft Priests team, if you want to take a look at where everything is looking. But yeah, so some other things have changed. There were some, what's the word? Undocumented changes. For instance, our 4-piece no longer scales with mastery. We're pretty sure that's a bug. And then the other thing, because in the past it has scaled with mastery, right? And then the other thing is okay, so there's a couple other things. So one of the other bugs that they introduced is your Shadow's Torment Mind spell is proccing Dark Thoughts now, which it hasn't ever in the past. And so we're guessing that it's not supposed to, but it's proccing Dark Thoughts. So if you go on the PTR right now and you're testing Shadow Priest, it's gonna look pretty strong still, because your Dark Thoughts procs from your Torment Mind are artificially inflating how strong it is, because you can get like infinite uptime of your 4-piece. I've had like up to 2 minutes of uptime where it's just I could just sit there AFK for 2 minutes and it would just keep going the whole time, right? So like I said, if you get on PTR right now, Shadow looks really strong, but that's because of mostly that Dark Thoughts bug where your Shadow is proccing Dark Thoughts when it's not supposed to. Although Blizzard hasn't come out and said that it's not supposed to, it's just that it hasn't in the past, and now it suddenly does. And they just nerfed it, so we're guessing that it's probably unintended and probably a bug. Another undocumented change, which is a good change in my opinion, is they have fixed the targeting issue of your shadow. So now your shadow will target whatever you target. In the past, the targeting of your shadow has been really kind of wishy-washy. Sometimes it targeted like the closest thing that you were in combat with, regardless of what you were targeting. Sometimes it targeted whatever you started it on and then never swapped from then. But now, if you're fighting multiple things, if you cast something on one thing, your shadow will start hitting that thing. Then as soon as you cast on something else, it'll turn and start hitting that other thing. So this is most likely what was intended from the beginning, because in the 4-piece text it says that it channels into your target. So this is likely intended from the beginning. I could see potential issues with this, especially because the shadow casts an AoE ability, right? So if you're in a Mythic Plus dungeon, for example, and you have a pull going in the middle of the dungeon or whatever, and your tank asks you to pull one thing that's way over on the side, right? Just to, like, you know, bring in extra trash to the pull or whatever, and your shadow is channeling, and you turn and you hit that thing to bring it in, then your shadow will turn and hit it as well, and will do AoE to anything that's within, you know, however many yards, and you could intentionally pull more than you were intending. You could unintentionally pull more than you were intending. Yeah, so it's probably just going to be like a thing that you have to play around, that you have to get used to. Probably not bad, and probably what they were intending from the beginning. And then the other thing to talk about, the final undocumented change, is that when you cancel aura, so this is, in the past, you could have like 40 seconds of time left on the buff, so your shadow would be channeling for another 40 seconds. In the past, you could use a cancel aura macro to get rid of the buff, and your shadow would instantly disappear and stop doing damage, which was really nice. It's good to have that ability if needed. So you would pretty much never do that, because you do 0 damage if you lose it, right? It's a DPS loss to cancel it, obviously. But there was potential for times where you might do that if we have like another Kel'Thuzad situation where you're going to want to stop damage every so often. And in the past, your Torment Mind, if you couldn't cancel aura, it would be you couldn't stop damage, right? When they said stop damage, you could stop all of your damage except for the Torment Mind, which would keep going. In previous versions of the PTR, it was cancel aura-able. You could use a cancel aura to get rid of your shadow. In the most recent update, that is bugged. So when you use a cancel aura macro in the current version, the shadow disappears, but the beam stays. It's really funny looking, actually, because you're supposed to be like your character, and then you have a shadow on top of you with a beam coming out of it. And now when you press your cancel aura, the shadow disappears, but the beam is just like floating, you know, a couple feet above your head, just like still doing damage. And so you can't cancel the damage that your shadow is doing. And I'm pretty sure it's because it's a debuff on the enemy. So there's a debuff that spawns. So when you use your shadow, you get a buff that's called Living Shadow, I think. And then the enemy gets a debuff, and that debuff is the beam doing damage to it. So now there's something going on where those two things are separated, because now when you cancel aura, it gets rid of your Living Shadow buff, and your shadow goes away, but the damage from the beam, like I said, stays there, and it's continuing to do damage. And this is a bad thing. You want to be able to stop damage if you have to, although, like I said, you would pretty much never use that unless there's like a really niche scenario where you're like, oh crap, we're about to push the boss at a really bad time, everyone's gonna die, everybody stop damage, and then you just have this beam coming out of your forehead that's doing you know, like however much damage, and it's impossible to stop. So anyway, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about what this means for the Covenant choice. So up until now, Kyrian Shadow Priest, real poopy. Venthyr Shadow Priest, also really bad. Nightfae Shadow Priest, okay-ish. Necrolord Shadow Priest has been way, way, way ahead, right? It's like you would play Necrolord guaranteed. I even like told friends before this nerf happened that there was no need to level up their Nightfae renown or anything else because it was like 99% chance you'd play Necrolord. But this changes that. So Pallid Command, Necrolord Shadow Priest is still going to be the highest DPS option. If we're talking strictly a 5-minute single target sim, although the gap between it and Nightfae has shrunk really, really, really small, to the point where it's probably worth it to play Nightfae Shadow Priest on Prog, even though it does a little bit less damage because of the bonuses that you get from it. If you're playing Dreamweaver, for instance, you get a cheat death with the Pod Tender ability. You also get the Soul Shape, which is going to be huge, especially for fights like Dosegni or Dosane, however you want to say it, the one with the halos that come out. You can Nightfae Blink over those and not take damage. Whereas if you're playing a Necrolord Shadow Priest, completely unavoidable. There's no way you can get over those without taking damage. So, yeah, so like I was saying, Nightfae Shadow Priest is looking to be probably what you're going to want to play on progression. Specifically because it does a little bit less damage, but that's not going to matter because Shadow Priests aren't going to be the difference, sadly, in whether you're going to meet a DPS check or not. And the damage difference is way, way, way smaller now than it used to be. Again, I'll leave a link in the description for the most recent sims so you can see exactly what the numbers are. So you can decide for yourself, if it's a 200 DPS difference, it's probably worth it. If it's a 1200 DPS difference, maybe it's not worth it, right? So I'll leave a link to those in the description. If we do end up playing Necrolord Shadow Priest, then there's also some incentive to play Shadowflame Prism as your one legendary instead of Pallid Command, because like I said, Pallid Command got nerfed like 40%, and Shadowflame Prism didn't. And Shadowflame Prism synergizes with our 2-piece bonus pretty well. So if you get to Prog and you have the 2-piece, and you're still playing Necrolord, then it might be worth it to play Shadowflame Prism instead of Pallid Command. And then as far as 2 legendaries go, obviously if you're playing Necrolord, it's got to be Pallid Command and probably Shadowflame Prism as well. And then for Nightfae, this is where it gets kinda not great. With 1 legendary, Nightfae is really, really, really close to Necrolord. With 2 legendaries, it's still pretty close. It's just that the Nightfae Covenant legendary is atrocious, right? It's just really, really bad. It's super buggy. It's hard to play around. It makes things like way, way, way harder. You have to think about like way more cooldown timings than you do as a Necrolord. So anyway, for Nightfae, you're going to be playing Shadowflame Prism, guaranteed. And then when you get to 2 legendaries, it might be worth it to swap back to Necrolord. We'll just have to see. The other thing I'll mention is a lot of people are kind of in panic mode where they're like, we're dead. I'm swapping off Shadow Priest right now. It's just absolute garbage. And to try and help with that, the Shadow Priest team for the Theory Crafters in the Warcraft Priests Discord, they're working on some feedback for Blizzard developers to try and get some to try and let them know how big of a nerf this is and why it's not really it doesn't really make sense. So we like I said before, we certainly needed a nerf. This nerf is way bigger than we needed. For a class to lose 3 or 4% single target damage would be a pretty big nerf. And like I said, we're losing 8 to 10%. So this is a huge nerf, pretty unwarranted. And there's hope, right? So like I said before, the Shadow Priest team is working on some feedback to try and get some of this reverted, or maybe some buffs in other places to try and bring us closer to where we were, and even just closer to other specs. It's not like, I mean, sure, we got nerfed super hard, but that doesn't matter so much. What matters is how we compare to other specs, right? And right now we compare really, really poorly. So if they could bring us up to something like that, that would be nice. Middle of the pack even. Maybe upper middle would be dope for me. And then the other thing is, in a single day, we went from being super, super strong to getting super, super nerfed, right? We got hit super far one direction. The fact that that can happen in a single day should give you solace in knowing that the opposite can happen as well. So while right now things are looking really dire, Shadow Priest is looking pretty down bad, right? Keep in mind that all of this is still subject to change. There's still time before the new patch. There's time for feedback. There's time for them to realize, whether or not this is as much of a nerf as they wanted or too much of a nerf, that kind of thing. It gives them time to have more data on PTR for how it actually is performing, for them to fix bugs and stuff. Anyway, so I'm not planning on re-rolling off of Shadow Priest. I do have my Balanced Druid in the wings, ready to go. So I would probably suggest, if you like playing Shadow Priest and you're not super concerned about playing whatever class does the absolute most damage, right? Then I would say stick to Shadow Priest and pray, honestly. Hope that they revert some of this or give us some compensatory buffs. But either way, that's all I've got to say about this. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. If you liked the video, make sure you click the like button. If you really liked it, feel free to subscribe, maybe share it with your friends, that kind of thing. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!